All right. Salute to Earl Sweatshirt. We actually got a lot, sorry, rather, hip hop related stuff, which I like, of topics to talk about. So let's get
I
right
like
to
this.
it. Um, you might have seen this interview. So again, salute to Earl Sweatshirt. I guess I'll just kind of read some of the caption. It's the page OK Player. Um, the art of the album will never go out of style. Earl Sweatshirt goes into detail about the modern day tradition of listening to playlists and dives deep into his die-hard love for the purity of bumping music in the classic way, in the form of an album. How do you prefer? So let's hear what Earl has to say about how he consumes music. And to give a bit, did you give a bit of a prelude? They're kind of talking about like how in this day and age, playlist is the prefer for a lot most people the preferred method of how they listen to music, and he's talking about how he prefers it and what he thinks, kind of how it relates to like the purity of music. So go ahead and play it.
Listen to music?
How do I listen to music?
Are you making playlists, hitting shuffle?
I just made my first playlist the other day.
Really?
I was staunchly against playlists.
Why is that?
Uh, Albums, they threaten the album, bro, and the album is like it's an institution.
Yeah.
Like when I was little, you come and interact with an artist, is like let me get this body of work by them, and then you can kind of like grow with it because
Mm,
get an album, and then I go through the ones that I like the most,
mm.
and then you start learning the album based on the one that comes before the one you like, the one that comes after the one you like, and you might hate those songs initially, but then through repetition of like listening to this album, now you start to acquire the taste.
Yeah.
So even if it's not your favorite thing, you're still endeavoring to understand this person's complete idea.
So it's Earl.
But
Actually, very well articulated, I might add. But obviously, like we acknowledge, obviously, the fact that playlists are such a um preferred way to consume music these days, it's almost like, yeah, you would say this is his view is more of like a older view, so to speak. And like I said, that's how he kind of grew up in it, so that's why he kind of clings on to it. Um, I mean, I guess this is just really like, what do y'all think of his view? Do you tend to agree with it? Do you think he's living it? You're living in the past, man. I think that's a Seinfeld reference. Sorry. Um, well, what do you think, Ghost?
I don't, for me personally, agree with his take, but I definitely appreciate it and think that it's valid. Um, the way I personally listen to music is that once I have like an idea of if I'm going to like an artist, be it through singles or if I listen to them before, most of the time, like at least 90%, I do like to listen to full bodies of work by them, like their albums front to back. And that from there, once I listen to the albums, then I'll usually, there's certain songs that I really like from them that I'll put into my permanent rotation. Sometimes the entire album is that good that I will just keep the entire thing um, in my listening repertoire. But I do get what he's saying as far as like the sanctity of listening to a project like by itself as opposed to just picking out songs and
Mm-hmm.
listening to playlists or putting everything on shuffle and never listening to a album front to back like some people I know. But um because again, I think that for some genres it's less important, but for the most part, like if an album is crafted with the appropriate amount of care and effort and time, you really should be listening to these albums in the order that they were intended to by the artist, at least for your first go around, because it contextualizes things in in a way that's true to the artistic vision, and I think a lot of times just sonically it kind of flows better and it sounds better. Again, this varies for different genres. I think hip hop, depending on the project and the artist, would be like lesser on that scale, um, as opposed to other genres. If you just go to a random album from an artist, pick out a couple features that, oh, I recognize this artist. Let me hear what this feature is. Let me hear what that feature is. Let me hear a random one. It's usually a pretty good representation of their work in that album. Again, there are exceptions, but then some other genres, like I'm not gonna listen to an indie concept album, like just picking out a random track in the middle. Like I'm listening to that front to back. So it is kind of different, but I do think that albums in general are preferable for the first time listen, and then when you're going back, like again, I have a list of songs that I'll put on shuffle and I'll play that from random artists, and just based on me listening to the albums, what I picked out that I like. And that's similar to a playlist, but I don't feel like if there's a song I know I don't like, I'm not gonna force myself to listen to it just because that's what the artist intended
Yeah.
when they put out the album.
Yeah, and that's the part one of the parts I want to hold on. Although it sounds like you do agree with them on like first take, but once you've consumed it, then you're on your own.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, and I guess as an artist, I guess he is maybe supposed to feel this way of just like it's kind of interesting how we flat out said it is like sometimes there'll be songs where you don't like, but then you kind of force yourself to listen to like them. That's definitely a hot take. Um, Therefore, I even get into my view on this whole thing. What about you, Ace? What do you think of Earl's view on listening to music? And I guess, do you have a preference one way or the other? Do you typically prefer albums, or do you like a mix of a playlist?
I pretty much agree with what he said. Uh, am near 100%. Like it pretty much articulated exactly the way I think about listening to albums versus playlists. Um, and I mean, I think it's pretty clear based on the last few years of Spotify, um, the Spotify yearly roundup or whatever it's called, where like most of mine is just all of the songs from a particular album
We
of
got the data.
the artist that I listen to the
It
most.
checks out.
So clearly, like I'm someone who kind of subscribes to the idea as well. It's not a hard and fast thing for me where I don't listen to playlists at all or I don't make playlists. Like I definitely do. Um, but at this point, it's my default where like even if I'm listening to a playlist, eventually I'll get to a point where a song comes on um that makes me want to listen to the an artist's full album or series of albums just full way through. So um I I was more intentional about it when I was younger, like avoiding playlists and just listening to albums the full way through. I don't know I don't know if I had a particular thing that influenced me to give playlists more of a chance. Um but yeah, I mean my thought process was pretty much the same. Like in order to get the intent, the full intent of um an artist, um an artist body of work, it just kind of seemed obvious to me that I shouldn't pick through songs that are the most popular or whatever, but um actually listen to the full albums and see if I like them. And maybe it's also because that's how we grew up. Like when we were younger, um, well, I guess before the bootlegging, or not necessarily bootlegging, but before before we were just ripping songs off of like LimeWire or whatever. There was the time when we would either have CDs or somebody would burn a CD for us, and we would listen to the CDs the full way through,
Front to
pretty
back.
much on repeat because we didn't have that many. So it is the way I got into listening to music. And again, like I think it was probably obvious to me that because of that, there were definitely songs where I didn't really like them on first go. I mean, I can remember like there's Deftones and Tool songs that I was just like, why did they even make this song? Like, I don't even understand why they made a song that sounds like this. And now it's like one of my favorite songs from that. And so
Really?
I can definitely agree that that listening to an album like that, it has its merit, especially if you're very open to hearing things that the artist has put together that maybe that's not the reason why you got into the artist, but you're still open to seeing everything that they have to offer and seeing if you know anything that they put on their albums work. um so yeah, I think that's my overall thoughts on it. I pretty much agree 100% with what he said. um and then yeah, as far as playlists, like nowadays I do, for me, I use playlists probably in the same way that most people do, where it's like if there's a certain mood I'm trying to get into or I'm into, um like, I mean, working out is the clearest example. I have a playlist that I made that's specifically for that, and it's because it puts me, like, it allows me to get into a specific mood and stay in that mood. And if I was listening to an album the full way through, like there's highs and lows with an album, but with a playlist, like you can curate it to be exactly the mood you want it to be, and for an extended amount of time. So I think that's where a playlist has its advantage. You're not subject to um the like, again, the highs and lows of an album. You can curate exactly what you want to hear, and have that play for an extended period of time. So I think that's probably the advantage, and I don't have any problem with people preferring playlists for that reason, or whatever. It's just my personal preference. I'm generally going to be listening to full albums.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, and it's also something I can relate to as well. I will say though, because obviously I guess I'm the more odd one out in the sense that I never listen to albums front to back all the way through. That's something almost I obviously have done before, but now that I'm in my adult age, I'm not bumping into music like that. Um, but I'm still very much conscious of the fact that most people, not most people, a lot of people do view albums like this, and especially people that have more creative or artistic view on things. Like, an artist put together this body of work, and like it's like if like a book, for example. All no, these things aren't bar for bar. You don't just open a book, jump to page 73, read it, and then jump around like that. So I understand if you were trying to kind of capitalize art, it's there's a order or a typical way that's meant to be consumed. Although I guess there probably isn't some artists out there that's made an album that you could just jump around and it still represents the type of project they want is great. But so I definitely get that. And what you were saying, Ace, like how playlists definitely come in for if you want a particular vibe and you want a certain level of variety that can keep that vibe consistent. That is where playlists definitely come into place. And I'm gonna tell you what else. Why else the popularity of playlists has increased, alliteration. It's because not only is you want certain vibes sometimes, it's also when a different mix of people come into place. I think. I mean, there's always been like clubs and just places where people come to party and then you like the DJ playing a variety of music. But it's especially when you're like at a function or like where we're with a group of people, it does sometimes it just don't make sense to play an album all the way through. And one of the
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
one of the
100%.
examples I can clearly think of, if Wes was here, he'd be able to attest to this because I believe I was with him. We're at the mall and we're at some store, and they were playing My Beautiful Twisted Dark Fantasy or whatever it's
I
called.
was there too. I
Oh, you were
remember
there?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, and the first couple records came on. Obviously, the title track and maybe even Power, and then obviously those records are bangers, so you're vibing to it. And then it just keep going through. It's like, Appall came on and whatever other records, and I was like, oh, and then just kind of me, oh, they're just playing the record, and it's just like, it's obviously one of the great, it's a great body of music, but at the same time, it's like, oh, so we're just letting it rock out. Like we're not mixing it up. We're not like you're not even doing a Kanye mix. You're just doing that album. And obviously, I'm not. It's not saying that the whole store was thrown off by it, but I just noticed it, and I'm like, oh, it just kind of. It's. I just, that's the feeling I got. It was like, oh, so that's where I definitely think where playlists come into place. But yeah, I can definitely get on board with the fact that if you do want to really be on board with what the artist is trying to, if you're trying to like attach yourself to what the artist is trying to represent, that probably is going to be the safest way. Um, I don't think anyone would come on here and say playlists like disrupt music or disrupt art, though. It's just like if you want to get this vision the artist put out, you listen to the album. Would that be accurate, or does anyone think playlists are like unholy?
No, I don't. I don't think so. I don't think I take that position. Like, even if the majority of people just started listening to playlists, the only way I would start feeling any type of way about playlists is if artists just stopped putting out albums because playlists became the prevalent um
Dang,
way that music is listened to.
you say that, but I feel as if there was an era, or maybe we're in the era where that is like the way to go. You just put out singles.
Yeah, that is the era we're in. I fucking hate it. But yeah, I
Dang.
think you're correct.
Huh, that's
Yeah, I
kinda,
mean that's the era we're in, but we haven't gotten to the point where artists do not put out an album. Like eventually they put out an album. Most artists at least.
eventually. That eventually
Yeah.
is kind of, can be a long time sometimes.
Bro, these producers that be dropping just singles and not full length albums, I want to strangle them. I want to strangle them because I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah, and I'm less likely to listen to somebody until they put out,
Yeah,
especially
it's
if they
like
haven't put out a full body yet. Like I'm
you
not just
gotta
gonna
listen to a
be
track from
listening to these singles.
2019, then 2022. Like, what are
Yeah,
we doing
exactly.
here, bro? It's like completely different.
Well, you could listen to the playlist that the song end up on, and then you're getting you're full of them. But I can
But
see
then
how
what if
that's
that
an
playlist only
annoyance
has
thing.
one song by that artist and it's not a song that you like, but if you heard anything else from the artist, you would like them.
Hey man, that's the other thing. I think there is a decent. I think it's fair to say people like enjoy variety to a certain extent. So I mean, at the end of the day, that's also one thing you have to be conscious of. Like again, I don't know how many. I don't know in this day and age how many people if you can just put on a whole like just put on Kendrick just like front to back. I think you're gonna have to mix. You're gonna have to throw some other artists in there, regardless of if you want purity or not. Um, but I think regardless of how you feel about it, I think the way Earl articulated it is a way was in a way in which it makes sense to a lot of people, and I think it's definitely a respectable view. Um, so yeah, I don't think there's anything to really debate about or anything to really dig too deep in about. I guess for the sake of
I
sanctity, for the sake of sake. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I will say I am surprised that he said he made his first playlist yeah, for the first time, because didn't he have like a radio show or something where he was like basically DJing and like playing a bunch of um uh kind of like very disparate types of music. I can't remember if it was a radio show or a podcast or something, but I know he's
Earl
done something
Sweatshirt,
like that.
Boiler Room.
It definitely sounds like an
No, it
Earl.
wasn't a boiler room.
It definitely sounds like an Earl thing to do. So I don't put it past. I just don't 100% recall it.
Okay. Yeah, because Yeah, I can't even remember who I saw him talking to. But maybe I'm making. I could be making it up. Maybe it was just on
Was
something.
it like
But I
a
thought
radio BBC One radio mix or something like that?
that's yeah. That's what I'm remembering. Um, and also he produces too, right? Right? He produces tracks.
Yeah.
I feel like for
Yeah.
himself,
So,
but I might be.
No, I think he does for other artists.
but yeah, I mean somebody that also produces beats like I mean hip hop beats in particular. You have to have an ear for a wide variety of sounds. So, I mean, I guess he could be listening to full albums of even the things that he samples, um, but yeah, I would have been more inclined to think that he was already, fully, fully endorse playlists as opposed to not, or at least have made one before. But that's the only thing that surprised me about it.
Mm. Yeah, I wonder what finally made him give it a try.
Yeah.
But yeah, if anything else comes up about that, definitely let us know. But yeah, I guess in general, um, for like listeners, let us know what you guys prefer. Do you prefer whole albums, or are you more of a playlist, mix it up type of person? But I guess if there's nothing else, we can move on to the next topic.